Well, I think it does. There is already an existing border. I've been going to Northern Ireland pretty well every week ever since I was appointed Shadow Secretary 10 years ago. And there's a currency border ever since the Irish Republic broke the parity with the punt and the sterling. There's been a currency border. There's obviously now a euro-sterling border. There's a VAT border. There's an income tax border. There's a corporation tax border. And in all the time I've been going to Northern Ireland and the Republic, not a single person has ever said this presents a problem. Because everything is done electronically.
Different from having a physical border to prevent goods from moving back and forwards without them being checked in some kind of customs arrangement and people as well.
This is a complete myth that anybody wants this, either north or south. Right through the referendum campaign, we made it very clear that there are electronic measures, electronic techniques. There are existing techniques such as authorised economic operators, and this can all be made to work if there's a will on the border. The border actually has a very, very small amount of trade. Northern Ireland has 87% of its trade is to the rest of the UK. Only 5% goes over the border. I remember going to Monaghan Dairies. 80% of their milk comes from Northern Ireland. It'd be very easy to licence those tankers that take the milk over the border as authorised economic operators. They could go over every day. They'd be recognised on a regular basis. All the invoices done electronically. It really is a very, very small problem if there is a will. If the Republic
let's bring
goes
Mairead
on this
McGuinness
current course,
there and
it'll be them that puts up the border.
Mairead, Owen Paterson sounds like he says you're rather exaggerating the problems here.
Well, I've listened to Owen several times and I've heard nothing new there. And he is right, if there's a will, we can find a way. What we haven't heard from the UK side, and this is a very serious matter for my constituency and for the island of Ireland and for Europe, we haven't found the way. And I really think that to bring up the issue of separate currencies and VAT, OK, it's part of the truth of the situation, but we don't have a border in the visible sense. And when the United Kingdom remains determined to leave the customs union and single market, the milk that he refers to, produced in Northern Ireland and processed in the Republic of Ireland, comes therefore from a country that is a third country, no longer a member of the European Union. And there are many issues about that. And I know the farmers in Northern Ireland are deeply concerned about the consequences for them as dairy farmers. And they're also very troubled by Owen's insistence that he wants to scrap many of the rules around the food industry and agriculture. Indeed, he wants to scrap supports for agriculture. So when I talk to farmers in Northern Ireland, even those who voted leave, they are now quite perplexed about what they're hearing from the UK side, not just around the issue of the border that we discussed this morning, but on the wider issues of trade. And that's where this problem will really lie and where we will have great difficulty. I'm more troubled this morning because I've read a quote where Liam Fox, the Trade Secretary, has said that the border issue, the Irish issue, will not be solved until the final stage, until we reach a decision on trade. I hope that the United Kingdom is not holding the Irish situation to ransom in these negotiations. It is far too serious and far too critical.
Right,
and I think Owen will also know that in terms... May I finish this point? I think it's an important point. We now have a situation on the island of Ireland and in Northern Ireland where we had built peace and we're all working and hope to maintain that. And I believe we will and we can. But unfortunately, there is no assembly. There are divisions between the two communities, but they're now becoming deeper. And we have to work really hard to avoid that. And part of that is to make sure, as Theresa May, the British Prime Minister, said on Friday, she wants the situation to remain the same as it is today post-Brexit. The only way to achieve that is to stay in the customs union and single market. That is the solution.
There's a lot there for you to pick up on, Owen Paterson. Let's start with this idea that it might be possible to come up with a final solution to the Irish border question after we've seen the shape of a trade deal. The EU have made it pretty clear we can't move on to talking about trade until the Irish border has been settled.
Well, some of those comments were completely ridiculous, and they've been repeated when we've done interviews before. The idea that Northern Ireland is going to be taken out of the single market of the UK, where it does 87% of its trade, is absurd. 17.4 million people voted to leave the European Union. They voted to leave the customs union. They voted to leave the single market and the jurisdiction of the ECJ. The idea that politicians in Dublin can suddenly try and force Northern Ireland to stay against the will of a very significant number of its citizens within an arrangement which will not serve them economically and politically is really very, very dangerous. And all this talk about the peace process, I can't think of anything more destabilising than the Republic of Ireland. This is a really important point. Now, sorry, I want to make this point. It is really very irresponsible of politicians to make a statement like that, saying they are going to force and blackmail the UK into giving a special status to Northern Ireland outside the rest of the UK. That is a really dangerous thing to do, and they should stop doing it. There are perfectly sensible technical solutions to the problem of the border. We currently have complete conformity of standards. The products going over the border go over generally on a very regular basis. It's a tiny part of trade between the Republic of Ireland and the UK. It's a really tiny part of trade between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, and it is soluble by modern technical methods. The idea that we're to go back to old customs posts with customs officials in breeches sticking a ladle into a tub of treacle is completely out of date. Nearly all these borders are managed economically. The World Bank did a survey of all the world borders. They reckon less than 2% of goods are inspected physically. So this is completely out of date, this talk.
Mairead McGuinness, the idea that the Irish are holding the British
very long-standing trading relationships over the border, and they can carry on with modern equipment.
All right, Mairead McGuinness, the accusation is that it's the Irish government who are holding the British to ransom over this.
Well, look, frankly, I'm a bit disturbed by some of the comments there. To describe my view as ridiculous, I don't think is helpful at all. To suggest that we're blackmailing is appalling. The truth is, and I think the UK and the Irish and the European Union know that we have had a difficult history on the island of Ireland and in Northern Ireland. We have worked hard politically and financially to make sure that we move forward, and we have moved forward. The reality also is that if the United Kingdom does trade agreements with other global partners and that goods flow into Northern Ireland, we have to therefore watch and know where they're coming from. And that will affect businesses in Northern Ireland as it will affect businesses in the European Union. I dislike this notion, and it's happening, and it's happened again in this studio this morning, that the United Kingdom and Owen Paterson would say that if borders go up, it's our fault. Let's be very frank, because we should be. We're neighbours and we're good friends. The European Union is EU of 28 today. We respect the democratic decision of the United Kingdom to leave, but I would also ask you to reflect on the reality in Northern Ireland, where people voted to stay because they knew the consequences for them. Regrettably, when the referendum was taking place, there was no talk about the consequences for Northern Ireland or the island of Ireland. And we now are left in a situation where retrospectively we're trying to find solutions. I repeat, and if it upsets your guest in studio there, I do it anyway, because we have to be frank with one another. The way to stay the same on the island of Ireland as it is today post-Brexit is for at least the United Kingdom to take their red line off the table. But to stay in the customs union and single market gives us what we have today, an invisible border, seamless trade, and it also will build and help us keep those relationships. The good relationships on our island and between our islands was helped in no small part because Ireland, the United Kingdom and 26 other countries can sit around a table. They sit in the European Parliament, sit at the Council, and we do business because we got to know each other. We have formal and we have informal talks and relationships, and that we should really strive to continue. It is in the interest of the people I spoke to on the border, those who wanted the United Kingdom to stay, and indeed those who might have had a different view.
Owen Paterson, can you see that this can be resolved before we know the shape of a final trade deal? The idea that the Irish question needs to be settled before we move on to talking about future trading relations. Is that even possible?
Well, just first, I would like to say, as someone who spent 3 years as the Shadow and 2 years as the real Secretary of State, going very regularly in both roles to Dublin, getting to know the main players on both the main political parties, I really do appreciate the tremendously good level of relations between the UK and the Republic of Ireland, with enormous benefits to so many people. And therefore, I'm absolutely dismayed at the talk this morning, which is completely unrealistic, of expecting Northern Ireland to be given a separate status outside, effectively, the United Kingdom. 87% of its sales, purely on the economics, are within the UK. So on economic grounds, it's crazy. On political grounds, it is very, very dangerous. There was a referendum at the time of the Belfast Agreement. There is overwhelming support for Northern Ireland to stay in the UK subject consent principle. And all the polls show that in a border poll, Northern Ireland will stay very firmly within the UK.
All right, I'm going to have to bring in Mairead just very quickly there for one last point.
Very
quickly, clearly, I hate to say, but Owen may not have been listening to what I said. I said that the United Kingdom would stay in the customs union and single market. I did not say that Northern Ireland should separately stay in the customs union and single market. Although that is a potential solution, it is not the one I said this morning. So please respond to what I have said.
Okay, I'm afraid we don't have time to respond to any of that, but it's an issue we will return to on the programme.
And otherwise.
Mairead McGuinness, Owen Paterson, thank you very much for that.
You didn't frankly have the balls to put country before party.